All right. Well, okay. Is my hand feeling better? No, not 100%. Um, all right. So, in my 2021 Best Pictures nominees review, I made a comment about Yoko Kanno, and I said, it turns out she's had a long history of ripping off other people's songs. And there are some fucking morons, sorry, but saying that I'm doing what the Kimba crowd was doing because I said that, right? And I'm actually kind of fucking pissed off that there are people in my audience, or maybe I don't know how much they are in my audience, but I'm kind of pissed off that they would understand that I put all that research into the whole Kimba Simba thing. They would understand that my principles and everything I said about that entire controversy and everything that I said value-wise in that, it's not just about that one specific instance. This is about like an entire philosophy thing. And they think that I would not have done any fucking research and that I only would have said the Yoko Kanno plagiarism stuff just by like clicking on one YouTube video and being like, "Yep, well somebody else said it." And so they're fucking morons now. Yeah, I guess this is an oh god Redditors situation. There are fucking morons now. Not that many, and perhaps I shouldn't be giving a lot of attention to it. I don't know. This just pissed me off. Um, and yeah, this isn't the only comment I got. There were some on the YouTube video. But yeah, there are legitimately people that, because they watched Charles Cornell's video, where he didn't even do a breakdown, where he literally just said, I listened to it and I don't think it's a ripoff. This is stupid and you're stupid if you think it's a ripoff. That's all he basically said, and I'll go over his video. But like, he didn't even break it down. He didn't engage with the argument. He didn't even go over like any of the actual similarities that people, have in question. And it's not because he couldn't do any music showing in his video for like fair use purposes or content ID shit. He was showing clips of other parts of the songs that he liked. So he just completely dismissed it, didn't put any critical thought into it. And I'm going to go over that. And these people are fucking stupid that are accusing me of being like, oh, Adam's being a hypocrite because of the Kimba Simba stuff, because now he's going along with the crowd that says that somebody ripped something off, but it's not true. And the reason I know it's not true is because Charles Cornell said it's not true. Anyway, I think Charles Cornell is a good YouTuber for the most part. I really like him. He made his career he blew up off of basically transforming internet meme video stuff into songs. So have you ever had a dream that you had? He's the one who like turned that into a whole arrangement, right? So he takes like the relative pitch of what someone's saying in their voice, and then places that on his keyboard and is like, okay, this is the exact pitch, and then thinks, okay, what chords would go well with that pitch? That's basically what he does. Apparently he went to school for writing music. I haven't heard any of the music that he's written. Regardless, besides the point, he is a talented musician. I like him, but he's very, very fucking ignorant when it comes to this subject, when it comes to copyright, when it comes to fair use, when it comes to plagiarism, and he completely dismisses any of the arguments that he knows exist, and just like completely misrepresents what people are saying. So this is apparently the argument that people watched and thought like, oh, Adam's stupid because this guy said this. Listen to this argument, okay?
Sick! By the way, just as a side note, I've been doing some research on Yoko Kanno to try to find out, everything that I possibly can about her.
So he was newly introduced to Yoko Kanno. His subscribers or fans were telling him to do more research into anime soundtracks, because there were things that he was looking to get into his catalog and things that he was looking to discover and react to, right? So this is his reaction to Cowboy Bebop soundtrack, and within this he addresses the controversy thing.
And I was kind of annoyed to come across accusations of her stealing stuff, and there was
okay, and I'd like to break this down pretty well for you, actually. Pay attention to how he comes into the controversy. He says, I was kind of annoyed to hear these accusations. So right away, and again, like this doesn't what I'm saying right now doesn't completely invalidate his perspective. Right away, he is coming into it completely dismissing the idea. As we'll see, he is of the perspective that pretty much whenever, as he'll say, and you'll hear him say, whenever people make these similarity accusations, that they're just bullshit, right? This is generally his perspective. He didn't go into this and have his mind changed by this. He wasn't under the impression that she ripped it off and then researched it and then found out otherwise, like me and my Kimba Simba thing. This is a person that went into it already just... He was annoyed to hear of the similarities, and now let's listen to him justify his experience here.
The particular video that everybody was pointing to is like, ooh, this is the proof that she stole all this stuff. And I'm like, as usual, when there's accusations like this, it's probably from somebody who doesn't really know what they're talking about very much. And it's just like, don't put this thing that I found that came before it. I knew about this before it. And I'm cool because I knew about something that apparently came before. It's
so this is his representation of the argument. The people that are suggesting that Yoko Kanno rips off other songs and that the inspiration is too heavy to call it fair. This is his representation of that argument. His claim is that people think they're cooler by knowing of a thing that came out before the other thing. This is his engaging with the argument. This is like, let's watch that again, just to be clear here.
Of her stealing stuff, and there was a particular video that everybody was pointing to as like, ooh, this is the...
And let's the particular video, I don't think he linked.
That is gravy.
If there is one particular video, I think it's... Oh, I didn't have the tab open. I'll just put it here. Yoko Kanno. If you just search up Yoko Kanno plagiarized, it's the first one. So I'm assuming that this is the one that he means, because this has a part 1, a part 3, right? Like, I didn't even get to part 3.
Yes.
Where Scout?
Thank you.
Question mark.
He'll be here on Sunday. So I didn't even get to part 3. Because I was interested after, basically, my experience with Yoko Kanno is I loved her music, listened to some soundtracks of animes that I didn't even watch. I believe Escaflowne is one. Wolf's Rain, I loved the music from Wolf's Rain, and I bought both soundtracks to it. Fucking love it. And that's why when in the film Judas and the Black Messiah, this song played, I thought it was a part of the actual score. It turns out that it was the one song in the soundtrack that wasn't a part of the actual score. And they had used a previously existing Bill Evans track from, I think, the 70s. But it anyway, came out well before Wolf's Rain. My initial reaction when watching Judas and the Black Messiah was like, holy shit, they ripped off a Wolf's Rain song. And I was like, I was so upset about it because when I determine that something's ripped off, as you might know from me watching my fucking months-long research project into Kimba the White Lion, as you might know, because I did that whole fucking 2.5-hour-long video. I don't just go like, oh, it sounds similar, it's a ripoff, like Charles Cornell is implying that anybody is doing because of the Yoko Kanno thing, right? He's dismissing everybody as doing that. I don't do that. And when I believed myself that the similarities were too unique to be considered a coincidence, here was my thought process. So I'm recording this at the same time. Hopefully this doesn't get muted by Twitch. Maybe I can fight it. So this is in the Judas and the Black Messiah soundtrack, and I thought that it was composed in 2020 or whatever by the composers. It turned out to just be from the 70s. Right? Some very soft piano, very specific feel, very specific emotions here. And it's not, when I say specific, I mean like there are tons of other piano parts that can sound like that. There are tons of other scores that can bring that same emotion, bring that same sort of feel. The Yoko Kanno one happens to be in the same chord. It happens to end in the same way on the same note, and even at that point, I would say it's just a coincidence, right? I would still say it's just a coincidence if this was all there was to it. But let's listen. So instead of bum bum bum, it's bum bum bum, but it's basically the same thing, right? Going for the exact same tones and emotions. I would say, okay, just a coincidence, or I would even say, oh, fairly inspired. If it was just that, then I would be on Charles Cornell's side here. But instead, the song goes, that final chord, listen, right? Final chord, things kind of like build up a bit, right? What happens here? Same chord, literally the same chord. Things build up in the exact same way, right? And then we get into this string section here. That sounds completely distinct from the piano part. Right? What do we get here? Takes like slightly longer to get there. There's a little bit more of a build up. This section is unique to the Yoko Kanno. Right? Not the exact same part for the string, not the exact same, literally the same notes, but communicating a lot of the same feel. Communicating a lot of the same feel and a lot of the same sound. Right? When I listened to this fucking song in the Judas and the Black Messiah soundtrack while I was watching the movie, I was like, holy fucking shit, this sounds exactly like a Wolf's Rain soundtrack. Like, the feel, the tone, the ideas that it's communicating are exactly the same. And you don't have to literally copy note for note for something to be considered plagiarism, for something to be considered a copyright infringement, right? You don't have to literally do, like, think of it like if you were writing a book, right? If somebody is taking the entire text of a book and pressing copy and paste into their book, that's plagiarism. But it's also plagiarism if you copy and paste the entire text and then change the characters' names and then make tiny little tweaks here and there and just enough so you can like pretend it's your own, right? Like, that's also plagiarism, right? And Charles Cornell really does not do a good job addressing or explaining what plagiarism is. Anyway, so these are very, very distinct parts, and I want to be absolutely clear that this particular song is the reason why I started down this rabbit hole. And when I went into this, I had my mind changed from a previous position. I did not think that Yoko Kanno ripped off songs. That's where I started my position. I did not think that. I thought that Wolf's Rain was being ripped off. I thought that Yoko Kanno was the victim of being ripped off. I was not aware of any of these other controversies. I was not aware that there were catalogs and compilations of people finding and noticing all these songs that are so suspiciously similar from Yoko Kanno, her always being the one that was created, later in time, just, oh, this song that came out a few years ago or however many years ago, just, Yoko Kanno just managed to create a song that's like almost identical to it, right? And so you go through this video, comparing similar songs, part 1 or whatever, right? And as Charles Cornell says, this video, I'm assuming that this is the video he's talking about, because this is like the one, I guess, right? Many of them, as I was watching through this, many of them are just like, Yoko Kanno, Ghost in the Shell. You hear this? I'm like, this is like similar. It's like a similar tone, but I wouldn't call this copyright infringement. I wouldn't call it plagiarism. You can be inspired by something and put enough of yourself in it to change it, to change the meaning, right? That's very important in copyright, is changing the meaning of something for it to be considered fair use, or, just not plagiarism. You need to have a distinct meaning, right? And this, I would say, is unique enough. These two songs, although they have similarities, to suggest that that's copyright infringement would be like, it would bring really terrible implications and precedents in terms of how people can write music. And 100%, if that was considered like plagiarism, then people would get caught in the crossfires of just having similarities in their songs, right? This track, as soon as it hit this track, and this started playing, I didn't even need to know which other song it was comparing it to, because I listened to the Matrix soundtrack a lot when I was younger. And sorry, Charles Cornell, this isn't just me pretending I'm cool because I listened to something old, and I'm cooler because I knew of the old thing first. That's not what this is. What I'm saying is that not only is it a very similar tone, not only is it a very similar feel and meaning, aside from the lyricism, I guess, it has identical structure. It has like I'm not stretching when I say identical. The structure is identical, right? So we're gonna listen to this. Wanna take you on a roller coaster. Then the next part comes in, and then drums, right? That is very specific. And then, as you're gonna see, we don't need to. I mean, this is yeah. Hurry up. Yeah. So, it doesn't need to play this much, honestly, but it is the same. Okay. Yep. Same cue, and drums. Right? Like, that's not... That... If Yoko Kanno is inspired... Sonex, I'm not sure you're understanding what I'm saying. If Yoko Kanno is inspired by this, she should have changed it up a bit, right? Now, I'm not suggesting that the individual melody or even the chord of these two tracks are identical, right? There's a little bit going on in terms of like the feel of the music that it's communicating. There's a little bit of difference there, but the structure of this is literally identical. It's literally an identical structure in terms of like when the guitar comes in, literally the exact same number of beats when the vocals come in, then the exact same number of beats for when the additional either extra guitar or synth sort of sound comes in, and then the exact same number of beats until, oh, you were joking. Please stop trolling me. Then the exact same number of beats before the drums come in, and then it's literally identical in structure. Like, that is not... If this was the only instance for Yoko Kanno, then I still wouldn't even, be like, oh, she ripped off songs. What really gets me and what really gets me to believe this is that my own discovery with Bill Evans and the Requiem song from the Wolf's Rain soundtrack, my own discovery was done completely independently of even knowing that Yoko Kanno had ever ripped off songs. It was done completely independently of having any idea of like where I would be going into it. Like, I thought Yoko Kanno was being ripped off. I didn't know that there was a controversy with her ripping off other people's songs, and now it makes sense. And this particular track, these two tracks, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this is one that I literally just fucking discussed. I don't even think that those two tracks are covered in any of this three-part comparing similar songs series or whatever. Like, I don't think that other people have discovered that one. Maybe they have. I haven't gone through every of them. But what really solidified my perspective was the first one, it being independently, and plus getting to this part in the video. Getting to this part and being like, wait, that's literally just the song from the Matrix soundtrack, right? Like,
what a beautiful man on my screen, oh my.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So anyway, this dipshit complete fucking idiot, making me I'm sorry. I'm like, but when I put so much work into like describing and standing by my principles and my values and like I live the things that I say. Yeah, when I say something like she has a history of ripping off songs, it's gonna be because I'm comfortable making that assessment based on what I've seen. It's not because I heard this on the internet and I heard a different thing and I want to be cool. That's not what happened. That's literally not what happened. I made that assessment because I had done my own research. Right? I wasn't going to say that unless I had actually gone through some of this shit and some of this shit, right? So this being said, I have not put as much research into this as the Kimba Simba thing, obviously, right? I could make a video about it, and we'll see where that leads me. It could lead me to retracting everything I'm saying right now. That's fine. I have not looked at this with a fine-toothed comb under every surface. Neither has Charles Cornell. Don't fucking pretend that Charles Cornell has when he has not. Because he's literally refusing to engage with the actual arguments. He's literally refusing to engage with the arguments and just making like wild straw mans of like what people are and what people who say these things are thinking, right? And Charles, I love you. I love your content, but this is just like way out of your field. I understand that you know music. I'm also a musician. I'm not as classically trained as you. I would argue that you are a better musician than myself, and especially when it comes to like the actual music theory terminology. A lot of the times I have something in my head and I don't know how to properly describe what I'm saying, right? A lot of the music is in my head. We both write music. That's fine. You're probably a better musician. I would argue that I'm much more knowledgeable than you when it comes to copyright infringement, fair use, and plagiarism. So let's continue on with this for a second.
This is the proof that she stole all this stuff, and I'm like, as usual when there's
Yeah. So this whole video, I don't remember how far I got into it. If I got like halfway through it, this would be the one where I'm like, yeah, that's it. I would if I were making this video, if I were the person that uploaded this, I wouldn't have included most of the ones in there. I guess it just says similar songs, and it's not. It just says comparing similar songs, and that's it. But I would argue that like most of what's in this video, and probably part 2 and 3, are so unsimilar that like they shouldn't even be in there. Because then you get Charles Cornell and people like him skimming through it, going through it and just be like, they must all be like this. When in reality, I mean, the second one that's in the video is like pretty fucking damning. If that was all it was, if it was just that one in that video, that's pretty damning. I would still not be saying in my videos that Yoko Kanno has a history of ripping off people's songs. It is that combined with the Bill Evans and Wolf's Rain song, which I just went over and I just described the unique qualities. And I should actually, I don't know if I properly explained this. What makes those qualities unique is that in terms of songwriting, I'm glad I getting back to this because I almost forgot. In terms of songwriting, the reason why I said the piano part on its own with the piano part of Wolf's Rain would not be an issue. The string part on its own with the string part of Wolf's Rain would not be an issue. It is how both of them exist in both songs, one after the other, and get there in almost the exact same way. So Yoko Kanno added like a tiny bit more to the build-up, and that's about it. Otherwise, it really just seems like the feel of the piano here, right? It seems like somebody listened to this and listened to how it built up into this part, and then we got these string instruments. Feels like somebody listened to this, Yoko Kanno, and wanted to replicate that exact same thing. I would not necessarily call that inspiration. I'm very inspired by many different musicians, Bright Eyes being one of them. If you listen to my album, 10 Years, then you'll understand that those inspirations are definitely there. You listen from the beginning to the end, you can hear like Bright Eyes' entire discography as like a feeling as a whole, right? Like you can feel like, oh, this is a song that could have maybe belonged in blank album, but not like identical to another
I
song.
could listen to you talking for hours even though I don't know music very much at all. Keep up the good work and streams.
Have fun, son. All right.
Kanno did not rip off Judas in the Black Messiah soundtrack. She ripped off a song that they had featured in the soundtrack that was actually written in the 70s. Like, I agree that artists build off of each other, right? And that there's a collective catalog and understanding of, like, music, film, writing, and that, like, you know, there's a succession of what inspires what. And you can tell in films and music, like, oh, this is inspired by this is inspired by that. You can tell I'm inspired by Bright Eyes, but at no point is there one of my songs where it's like, oh, this transitioning into this is exactly like this Bright Eyes song. This part's like that one song. This part's like that one song. And they build in the exact... That doesn't happen, right?
Yes.
Or at least, if that does exist in my album, it's not in any kind of way where the qualities are so unique. If you were writing this piano part, right? If you were writing this piano part, everywhere that it decides to go within this piano part, you could argue is a logical progression of something that already exists. So like in my Kimba Simba video, I talked about how if you're making a animated property about lions in Africa, it would therefore make sense to have hyenas as a villain. It would therefore make sense to have all these other animal characters that exist because they're African animals. It would therefore exist if you're going to have a villain lion, he might have a scar on his face or have darker colored fur. That is all logical progressions. Everything that exists within this piano portion of the song is a logical progression. That, like, it makes sense where it would go. Anybody who's writing it, you know, you could have a completely different person starting at the same point and probably come up with something fairly similar. Because that's where the starting point was. But as soon as it gets into the string section, this is unique. That's what makes it unique, is the piano plus the strings. The string section's on their own. If you keep going with the string section, everything that comes in this part... Oh, fuck, it sounds so much like Wolf's Rain. Oh, my God. It's literally the same chord progression. Holy fuck. Everything that comes in the string part, right? That makes logical sense. But the build-up from piano to string and the fact that both of them are in the same song, that makes the song unique, right? That makes this a ripoff. And if it was just one thing, I'd be willing to give the benefit of the doubt. But that plus the fucking lunatic calm thing, I'm just like, I'm sorry, I can't. So if somebody wants to disprove how I feel about this, if there is evidence of Yoko Kanno saying that Requiem from the Wolf's Rain soundtrack is a cover song of Symbiosis, Second Movement, etc. from Bill Evans, if there is evidence of her saying it's a cover song, I completely retract what I said. I could not find such evidence. I didn't research it for 8 months like Kimba. I could not find such evidence. So maybe it exists. If there is evidence that Cowboy Bebop Pushing the Sky, if she says it's a cover of Lunatic Calm Leave You Far Behind, if there's evidence of that, then I will retract what I said, and that's fine. There's tons of her songs, obviously. She brings a lot to them. She's so fucking talented. I love her music. I fell in love with a lot of what she was doing. But unfortunately, it sucks because now I have to wonder, like, how much of it did she actually write because of that Requiem thing specifically? But let's keep going through Charles Cornell's video.
Accusations like this, it's probably from somebody who doesn't really know what they're talking about very much, and it's just like, don't put this thing that I found that came before it. I knew about this before it.
This is his representation of the other side of the argument, and this caused someone to say he's a jazz pianist and he's done his research. Like, what the fuck? He's not even engaging with the argument. That's not doing your research. You're not even engaging with the argument. I can't believe somebody posted that.
And I'm cool because I knew about something that apparently came before. It's stupid.
I'm cool because I apparently knew of something that came before it. Sorry, That's not what the argument is.
It's just dumb. I understand if people who don't fully understand what they're listening to can hear something and hear the similarities and not understand the difference between influence and blatant plagiarism.
Yes. And I agree that that happens a lot. I agree that that happens a lot, and it pisses me off too. As somebody that writes music, as somebody that loves music, as somebody that I would argue understands music, that pisses me off a lot too. Totally with you here, Charles Cornell. It is because of the unique qualities that I mentioned earlier that I do not believe that this is one of those cases, unfortunately. I love Yoko Kanno, a lot of what she's done, but unfortunately I cannot give her the benefit of the doubt for that after these song similarities that I had independently noticed, independent of any existing videos or compilations or anything. Anyway.
But plagiarism is literally the exact transference of something that already existed and just using it again.
That is not true. It is not the exact transference, right? Plagiarism. Oxford University. Plagiarism is presenting someone else's work or ideas as your own, with or without consent, by incorporating it into your work without full acknowledgement. All published, unpublished material, whether in manuscript, printed, or electronic form, it's covered under this definition. Plagiarism may be intentional or reckless or unintentional under the regulations for examinations. Intentional or reckless plagiarism is a disciplinary offense. What he listed is a form of plagiarism, is verbatim, but there are other forms of plagiarism, like paraphrasing. When you paraphrasing the work of others by altering a few words and changing their order, or by closely following the structure of their argument, is plagiarism if you do not give due acknowledgement to the author whose work you are using. Closely following the structure, which was identical, the structure of the song. I know perhaps this definition didn't literally mean song structure, but I would argue that it definitely applies here. The structure of the song is literally identical in Pushing the Sky and fucking Matrix soundtrack, Lunatic Calm, Leave You Far Behind. Literally identical. Identical structure, completely identical structure, right? Anyway, like you can't dismiss it and just say like plagiarism is only when you use the exact same words, when you use the exact melody and exact chord progression, and that's it, right? That's not plagiarism. If you understand anything about case law and what artists have actually had to pay royalties or pay damages after being sued. If you had a thorough understanding of what can be constituted legally in case law as plagiarism, you wouldn't be saying that. That is completely misrepresenting what plagiarism is. But let's go on. Sorry.
And not understand the difference between influence and blatant plagiarism. But plagiarism is literally the exact transference of something that already existed. And
using the word exact, you've already lied. It is not the exact. It is not literally the exact. That's literally lying. You're literally lying right now. I can't believe it. What a Weasley little liar, dude.
Of something that already existed and just using it again and then taking credit for it.
That's you. I can't believe I can't believe he said that, and that this person watched the video and said he's done his research. I'm sorry. I didn't even know I was going to make this video. I watched this video like 2 fucking months ago, and it pissed me off because I love Charles Cornell. And I saw this and I was like, oh my God. After the whole fucking Yoko Kanno thing that I had discovered in the fucking Judas thing. And I was like, oh my God. I was so tempted to make a video, but I didn't want to because I knew that if I was going to make it properly, I would have to do like a fuck ton of research and do a deep dive. So unfortunately, because I'm covering this right now, and I haven't done the 8 months of research that I did in my fucking Kimba thing, sure, maybe there will be another version of this in the future. But I believe that the amount that I have observed on my own as somebody who writes music, as somebody, who came to these conclusions independently without even knowing about the controversy, I would argue that I have enough for my own beliefs and be confident in saying that I believe that Yoko Kanno rips off people's songs, right? Now, this is also a philosophical discussion. This is a philosophical argument of like, okay, how far into borrowing or, let's say, being inspired by someone's work can you go? How far into that can you go, right? Before it's plagiarism. Because I'm not arguing that you shouldn't be allowed to be inspired by something. I'm not arguing that you shouldn't be allowed to take inspiration to even like use something as not necessarily like a template, because that can easily be too much legally, especially, but as a oh, what's the word? Kind of like a I guess I'm really stretching to find another word when I literally just mean inspiration. Inspiration is just a good word to use. I guess I'm going to stick with that. Sampling can be considered fair use. I would argue that there's far too much restriction on sampling, even. I would argue that Death Grip's album, where they can't release it on major platforms because of legal threats, I would argue that, that would be easily fair use, as long as the well, not easily, but could be considered fair use in a court of law. Ex-military, yeah. But unfortunately, that never made it to court, and that's how a lot of these things happen. They don't make it to court. They either get settled or they cease and desist, and so in Death Grip's case, they don't sell it anymore. Yeah, exactly. Like, sampling is like, there's a clear understanding of like what the original is in a lot of sampling. Like, if you can tell it was sampled, that the sample's there. And yeah, with something like Death Grips, it's like it's making it your own. They're taking something that exists previously, changing the meaning, changing what it is, changing the entirety of the song, using it to make something else, to use something existing and making something else out of it. That's great. What Yoko Kanno has done with these examples that I provided is try as hard as possible to replicate the feeling and experience of the original, right? To replicate the same experience, that's where the line is drawn, really. And again, it depends on the case. It's a case-by-case basis. But what Charles Cornell is saying here is just really, really, really incredibly ignorant and inaccurate. And it pisses me off that people are calling me a hypocrite in my subreddit because of this video. So now I have to respond in some way.
In blatant plagiarism, but plagiarism is literally the exact transference of
All right, I've explained why that's wrong, but let's go.
Something that already existed and just using it again and then taking credit for it. And that is not anything that happened here at all. Completely baseless. And I can hear the influences, but if you're going to point out the influences to these specific songs that you found that are magically, oh my god, this sounds sort of similar.
See, this is the problem, is that, like, I believe that he's gone through a few of these to come to the conclusion where you say sort of similar. I would argue that most of them in this video are sort of similar, that they do not constitute any reason for being compared, honestly. Oh yeah, he's extremely condescending about it. You could argue I am too, that's fine. But what the problem is that he's not engaging with the actual arguments, and he's dismissing anybody who he wasn't critical at all about his preconceived ideas about what the situation was. And as we just saw at the beginning, maybe people showed up a bit late, you didn't see it. As we saw in the beginning, he literally was upset when he heard about it. He was already upset. He thinks that these are just generally how these things are, and he'd made up his mind before even going into it.
If you're going to point out the influences to these specific songs that you found that are magically, oh my god, this sounds sort of similar, and like, you're not going to point out that everything else that she has written and many other composers have written, everybody's influenced by something else.
Yeah, that's a complete misrepresentation of the issue here. And I agree with this statement in principle, and as a general rule. Like, I write music, but like, whether I'm even conscious about it or not, it's going to have similarities to previously existing things, right? Like, obviously it is, because otherwise there would be no baseline for how music could be written, right? Like, I didn't invent music. I didn't invent genres when writing my songs. They exist in the catalog of a language that had been written before, like, and again, I guess if we're going to use the term language literally, you could say the same thing about literature, right? You can write a book, but if you're following like a traditional story structure, then yeah, obviously the similarities there already. You're going to have similar characters to another thing. You're going to have similar XYZ. Like, you can't avoid similarities. But when your catalog of work features many notable instances of not just similarities, but songs where you could confuse one for the other, like where it's so fucking obvious. And again, this is not every single one of hers, but it's there's enough in there where it's not just like, oh, this is just some, oh, like I couldn't have helped it because music is a language that was written before I existed. You know, like, it's not one of those. It's, oh my God, it's so frustrating. Because in principle, I agree with what he's saying, but it literally just does not apply to this situation. And I'm willing to give Charles Cornell the benefit of the doubt and assume that the similarities that I went over earlier are ones that he was not aware of, and he skimmed through some of the videos. And, you know, if you're clicking at random points on the video, 9 times out of 10, you're going to find one where the similarity is useless and shouldn't even be there, right? It's just a similarity. That's it. But there are such clear examples of Yoko Kanno ripping off music that it's like, it would be so unreasonable for those to exist and for me to have discovered one of those similarities completely independently without even being aware of the controversy beforehand. Anyway.
All of everything I've ever written is
kind of
influenced
repeating
by
myself.
something else. John Williams jacked Gustav Holst's entire shit. Like, that's just how this stuff works. It's not...
Okay. I haven't watched this video in a while. It's been like a couple months. I forgot about this other element of this that is kind of concerning. I haven't heard his music. He is classically trained for composition. I'm worried, and again, this is not an accusation, I'm just worried. You know, people's brains work differently. I don't know how he thinks of him writing his own songs. I'm concerned that if he is writing music, what he's doing then, if he, like, perhaps the take a song and then add little tweaks to it until you can pretend it's your own. Maybe that's what he does, and maybe that's what he thinks everybody else does. I don't know. I'm not going to make that accusation with any sort of like confidence or credibility. This is not an insult if you see this. I'm just saying, for you to dismiss these Yoko Kanno ones, all of them, as that, I don't know how else to rationalize it. I don't know how else, because you understand music, right? You understand music, and it's I don't know. It's a little concerning, but I don't know.
Plagiarism, it's influence, and it's inspiration. Unless there's
there's very different types of understanding music. Let's remember that. And I'm not trying to discredit his understanding of music, but there are different ways of engaging with and comprehending music as it exists, right? There are some people whose music is all in their head. You know, they're like autistic savants where they can completely replicate a song that they just heard with all of the like specific intonations. You know, that exists. There are also people who are very creative in terms of how they write songs. They might not know a lot of music theory. They might not have interpreted it and been educated formally in it and understood music in a mathematical sense, because music is, in very many ways, it's math. There's a lot of people that might not understand that, but they can actually compose competent music because of how it feels to them. And they have a feeling, it's like a sense, right? So music can be a very literal thing, and it can also be a very interpretable thing. And so people understand music in different ways. There's people that can literally ace every single music theory test in existence in the same way that like a fucking mathematician can ace a math test, right? Sorry, a math test. There's people that can like understand everything about music theory, but not have the ability to compose any music by themselves, because these are essentially two different parts. the same language, right? We're talking like creativity versus like literal interpretation. So I don't know exactly which skill points Charles Cornell has in terms of like how he understands music. I think that he is a talented musician, and I think that he does understand music. But we also have to remember that there are many, many, many different ways to understand a concept, especially something involving art, which is music, which is literal, but also so interpretable at the same time, objective and subjective, depending on who you ask and depending on what song, right? So anyway.
An actual stealing of a melody and a chord progression and just writing the same thing over again and taking credit for it. That would be what plagiarism is, but that's not.
And again, you're describing a type of plagiarism verbatim when paraphrasing is also plagiarism. And that is something that you never address in this video, and you just pretend like it doesn't exist. But all right.
An actual stealing of a melody and a chord progression and just writing the same thing over again and taking credit for it. That would be what plagiarism is, but that's not what's happening here. I found that accusation, and I was particularly annoyed by that because it's attempting to detract from the absolutely incredible work that Yoko Kanno has done.
The equivalent of what Yoko Kanno has done with some of these examples. So the ones that have convinced me. So the one that I found through the video and the one that I discovered myself independently. Those are akin to something that would be like a parody. So you know how in sitcoms, like any comedy television shows, where they'll have a scene where it's like Rocky. A lot of times they won't use the Rocky music. And you know how the Rocky song dun 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 bum 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 bum, right? A lot of the times they won't use the exact song, but they'll use something that is similar enough that they can get away with it while clearly replicating the original in a way where it's like, oh, you're supposed to understand that it's the exact same because it's so similar. That is like what Yoko Kanno is doing, but without the parody element, because Yoko Kanno is not parodying those songs. She is passing them off as her own. And in Japan, they don't even have parody law, right? And the reason, and also, if we're going to talk legally, I know some people have said like, oh yeah, this definitely wouldn't be the case because Yoko Kanno has never had any actual trials over this, and you know, this has all just been speculation, and there hasn't actually been any legal battles over this. Things get really complicated when you're not in the same country because copyright law is federal. So you have to understand that, right? And also, like, it really depends on the scope and scale of where something is. Like, there's a bajillion instances, potentially, I guess, of copyright infringements where a company could be like, yeah, that's definitely a ripoff, but are we really going to go over to court over this and file a motion in a different country? Like, and like, is this something that we are going to spend money on trying to do? What would the damages even be? How much money was made off of that one song appearing for 2 minutes in Cowboy Bebop, right? So it's like, those are other things to consider, that just because something did not go to court does not prove innocence. It does not prove guilt, right? That is completely irrelevant. So just throwing that one out there because there were people using that as an argument.
In her career. All right, moving on. Next tune we're going to look at, Bad Dog.
All right, that was his whole thing. Yeah, that was his whole shtick with the Yoko Kanno thing. Charles, love your videos. I'm sorry if this came off as a personal attack. I did not mean for it to. But unfortunately, your videos are being used as some sort of like proof or evidence to people that trust that you've done thorough research on a subject that you have not, trust that you are not misrepresenting the subject, whether it be in, the specific examples of songs or the understanding of legal terms or plagiarism or anything like that. Unfortunately, there are people that look up to you, and I'm not saying people shouldn't, but because of what you've said in this video, I have to make a response. Because otherwise people are going to call me a fucking hypocrite after my Kimbo video, as if I didn't fucking do my own research on this too. All right, so maybe this will be turned into a video, like a longer video later. Maybe this will be like an entire fucking breakdown if there are seriously going to be people being like, completely misrepresenting this whole issue, if there are seriously going to be people acting like I'm a fucking hypocrite for making my Kimba Simba breakdown and dispelling that conspiracy theory, and then also being comfortable saying that Yoko Kanno rips off music, in my opinion, I'm sorry, this ain't it, Chief. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm like, I needed to get that out of my system, and now I can go watch some movies. In the end, does she or not? I'm comfortable saying she does, based on what I've seen. I would not throw that accusation out there if I had not been convinced to my own standards of how I view art, how I view media, how I view inspiration, how I view plagiarism, how I view copyright, etc., etc. But yeah, I'm so disappointed in people. I'm so disappointed in people to be aware of my Kimba Simba thing, to be aware of it, and aware enough of it to think that I'm being hypocritical about this, and then say shit like, here's a video where Charles Cornell, a jazz pianist, has done his research and determined that the accusations of plagiarism is completely baseless. Fuck you. You're a fucking asshole. I am pissed off at you, okay? Fuck yourself in Minecraft. Legitimately. In Minecraft. I cannot stand how fucking stupid that is. Holy fucking shit. He didn't break it down. He literally just said, people who think this want to be cool. Want to be cool because they came up with they thought of the first thing first. And you said he's done his research and his credentials as a jazz pianist means he's right. Like fucking, this is interpretable, by the way, especially when it comes to music. You can make arguments. You can make arguments either way. Fuck off. I'm so pissed off. I'm going to watch some movies. All right. Sorry, everybody. Bye.
Hey, hope you liked the video. Here are this month's Patreon credits. The $5 and up patrons are Wholesome100 Big Chungus Lemonade Warrior, TheMessers.com, Kai Butcher, Pit Inhabitant, Gabriel Herrera, Kirbymon, Splat, Hoofy Doe, Olivia Spores, Ocean Machinery, and Malav Shah. See you guys later.